We're going to start today just by coming home right away. So just do a quick check of your current external environment. Is there any modification that it would make sense to make for you? That could be shutting a door or asking someone to go to the other side, or maybe asking somebody else to shut the door, which I just realized I hadn't done yet. That was funny. It also might be finding a more comfortable position. One of the things I'm very aware of with listening to folks talk about Zoom fatigue is that, a lot of people are sitting really close to their screen. I myself moved my stuff to where I have more natural light. And so when I naturally look away to think, because that's what I do, I will be looking at something other than a screen. So there might be some other external changes to make that might make this really be something you could settle into for the next little bit, which is kind of what we're wanting to do. So having made any of those modifications, let's all now also seek to settle in to ourselves. And just a few minutes ago, I noticed I was just super excited about the webinar, and also really still thinking about the last webinar that I just got off of not too long ago, and the heartfelt nature of that conversation. And I just was kind of racing because it all feels important, and I hope to serve you all well, and I can just kind of get up in my head sometimes. So I just noticed I was going a little too fast. So I told Megan I was going to run through the slides again, and I got to this one and I just stopped. And I was just like, oh no, I think maybe I need to spend a few moments with this slide. So I would invite you to close your eyes. I'm going to stop my video. Boy, that happened again, Megan. I want to stop my video and just let you hear my voice for a second. But I'd like you to just close your eyes, or find a spot in the floor just a few feet ahead of you, something to look at that you can fix your gaze on, and just allow your gaze to kind of soften and relax. You can close your eyes, or you can look at the flame on the screen. And I'm just going to invite you to start to bring your focus to your breath. Noticing your breath as you inhale, noticing the breath coming in. Where is it entering? How is it entering your body? Noticing yourself holding your breath. Noticing your breath leave your body as you exhale. With your own rhythm, just noticing your breath in. Notice the holding. Notice the exhale. Today, I'd like you to just be a little mindful of each time you exhale, trying to exhale just a little bit longer. Maybe making a sound like an S sound, the sound of the air coming out of the tire, engaging your diaphragm and allowing yourself to exhale more fully. Still noticing your breath coming in. Noticing your exhale. Gently forcing the air out. On each breath, allowing yourself to fall a little more deeply into your innate health, into your well of being. Releasing the busyness and the responsibility, the hecticness, the processing, letting it all go, and just allowing yourself to come home to receiving mode, where you're just going to allow yourself and give yourself permission for the next little while to just let some stuff in and to wonder about it. Breathing and dropping. Coming home to your deepest, wisest self. This energy that's always with you. This energy that's holding your experience. a place a dear friend of mine calls home or home base. So we're just coming home. It's kind of like if you're out in your neighborhood talking to a bunch of people and it occurs to you that it's time to go home, then you go home. Similarly, if you notice that you've been shopping in a lot of thought stores or riding some thought trains, that if it occurs to you that it's time to come home, then you can come home. To give ourselves permission to release and drop back in. Permission to rest in this moment, just for now, into this learning, into your health. And on this last breath, or set of breaths, offering kind regards to yourself, appreciating yourself for giving yourself this time today, and kind regards to our community as well, which I extend to you now with my deepest heart. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back, or keep them closed, or take a nap, whatever kind of relaxed learning you want to do today. So there's no pressure, there's no evaluation, there's no test, there's just listening. Wanted to start by talking about what it seems like folks have gained from session 4, or up through session 4, that should say. People were appreciating that they seem to be refining their ability to notice, so that they've been able to notice when they're maybe reactive, or that when they're in a low mood, when they're having a moment where they feel out of sorts or out of alignment with their value guided self. People are starting to notice that. Some folks, I like that one person used the expression jump thoughts. And I think that's probably jump on a thought train, but jump thoughts, that first thought through. This person had gotten better this week at noticing the first thought through. And if you don't notice them, again, then you have to be at the mercy of them. Quite a few folks appreciating the idea of like noticing that they're making up their experience and they're brewing some tea, some realities, some different realities moment to moment. Starting to notice the creative process of your moment, as opposed to feeling like it's being brought to you by the sponsors of the TV show, that you're actually creating it, and it varies moment to moment. And quite a few folks are able to really latch on to this idea of shopping in thought stores, and that quality of like really being stuck in like just one pattern of thinking and kind of ruminating or circulating around, or just buying what they sell in that thought store. So there's some really good noticing going on. One person noticed last week when we did the settling in exercise like I just did, they noticed how helpful it was, that they noticed that they were in terrible headspace until we did that. And what's excellent is having some practices where you're going to give yourself the opportunity to quiet. And then, noticing when you're in terrible headspace, and knowing that it can be as simple as listening to some colleague from campus talking in a soft voice, asking you to breathe. That can help you shift out of that terrible headspace. If I can help you shift out of that terrible headspace, then so can a piece of music that helps settle you, or the sound of the waves, or a sound machine, or a rain forest. Today the rain was just so pretty, I just sat for a while and listened to it. And it helped me come to a deeper cleansing place, psychologically speaking. A couple people really talked about the flashlight being helpful, this idea that you are the one holding your psychological flashlight of attention, and that you can direct it wherever you want to. And that is an easier process, choosing to direct my attention to the present moment, just to enjoy the present moment and just to rest and drink it in, but also to separate from the experience I was just creating. That instead of trying to grab a hold of that experience and wrestle it and get it back in the box, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to correct it. We don't have to judge it. We don't have to debate it. We don't have to write a dissertation about it. We can just remove our energy from it so that it falls on its own. It can't continue without you pumping it up. And so this idea that you're the director, you get to shift, you get to say, what's happening for me is not okay. I'm getting trauma triggered. I think it would be helpful to calm down. How do I do that? Oh, let me put my flashlight on something. I did this with my kids when they were little. We'd be sitting in their room at night and we would illuminate one thing at a time with the flashlight in their room. And sometimes it would be something, cuddly, and sometimes something like an action hero or something. And like whatever we illuminate, then I could talk to them about whatever I illuminate with my attention is what I'm going to bring to life. A quote I heard this week that reminded me of our time together is that we are always feeling our thinking. Like we always are physiological. This is the thought cycle that some of you have some trouble with the actual image of the thought cycle and do better when you just hear me talk about it. But this is what it means, like that whatever thought I'm attached to, it gets brought to life physiologically. And out of that comes my physiological and emotional experience. And then that is behind my behavior. And so instead of trying to not feel something, if we direct ourselves to the present moment, it can interrupt it more gently, effectively. And again, that doesn't mean that we're not going to then, after we're settled, invite ourselves to have new ideas and then shine our flashlight back on that problem with a new sense. I was just talking with a group who somebody was processing a lot with their job. They would, when they felt stuck, they would just come down and look at a puzzle they were doing, and that would be the shapes and the color of the puzzles, and they would just let themselves be with that for a few minutes reflectively. And then when they went back, they could see something that they didn't see before. Quite a few people, I'd say 5 or 6, spoke to the idea of having a clear understanding. This is actually somebody's quote: having a clear understanding of the space I need between the circumstance and my first thought. So really people getting attached to the idea that it's okay to slow down our process, to slow our roll, as I have heard said, to like not have to be on it so much, because that rapid firing is tending to take us to quick judgment and quick upset sometimes, quick frustration sometimes, that may not actually help the situation. It may, but it may not. Quite a few people establishing, like really appreciating the going back and the me asking you to be specific this week about what you're focusing on, because you're doing some of that practice. And for some folks, it's starting to feel a little bit more like a habit to be noticing. So it's going to take different amounts of time for each of you to start to actually have that feel like it's more second nature. And so if you're still like needing to remind yourself, and if you're still forgetting a lot, that, you've been patterned for years and years. So some of us 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, I don't know, however long or however old the oldest person is on the webinar, but for a lot of years, we've been conditioning to do it this other way. So it's going to take some time and some, dedication over the course of time to just become a more committed noticer. A more committed noticer and a recovering judger, right? We want to notice more, judge less, and then just move to the new experience quicker so that we get to be who we want to be more of the time. One person said, I'm noticing that I'm not very unique in how I manage issues, meaning there's kind of a cultural habit here, the trance of scarcity. Like we all get into this mindset. That's why toilet paper disappeared all at the same time, right? Like we all get into this mindset. So I was touched by that thought. Like, yeah, you may not have been very unique in how you manage issues, because you get into your head and you do the things that humans do when they don't know to do differently. But I have to say that you will be unique, because I think that people experience that part of me as unique, because I have skills that are not commonly taught. That's why I'm trying to help you see them, so that you might respond in a way that feels new and fresh and not so patterned and old and habitual, so that you can have a different experience. I decided to do a little pre-Q&A today because there were just a couple things that were so important and such good questions. The first one kind of goes to that, this idea that I'm not learning fast enough. And it's got a scarcity mindset too. The scarcity, there's a book called The Trance of Scarcity, which is a very good book. It's Victoria Castle. I cannot believe I remember that. So Megan, if you could put that in there, that'd be great. The Trance of Scarcity by Victoria Castle. And she talks about how we all get hypnotically put into a cultural trance of like not enoughness. Like I'm not doing this practice enough. I'm not learning enough. I'm not learning fast enough. So this idea that, just sort of trusting that every time you catch yourself and you readjust and you get to be that value-guided self more often, every time you do it, you're reinforcing your ability to do it. In mindfulness training, sometimes they talk about like if you have a rut that goes a certain way, and the wagon has gone over that spot over and over and over. It takes a while to be off the beaten path, but if you continue it, you'll have a new path. And that's what we're looking for. So I just want you to not be so scared that it's not going to continue over time. Because there's books, I said this for the Friday webinar folks too. We gave them a list of things they could be reading. There, you can choose to participate in some one-on-one sessions, not all of you, not all at the same time, but we can find people to help you kind of think about this some more. And Megan and I have decided that we wanted to offer some follow-up webinar drop-in sessions. So they're going to be every 2 weeks on Thursday, starting on the 28th at 12:30. Is it the 28th, Megan, or the 21st?
The first one that they would be a part of would be the June 4th one. It'll start on the 21st. And then after their last session, they would join us on June 4th. And we'll include that in our follow-up email with the link and information so people can add it to their calendars.
And for the time being, those are scheduled through the summer semesters. And then we'll see what happens if, how many people are using them and are they still useful. When I used to teach the Breaking Free from Stress class, I had one Monday evening a month where we got together in the Kellogg Center Auditorium, which I miss. And we just had people ask questions and we just had like a Q&A and a community conversation. And then we stopped doing those for a while, but this is an example of that. So you'll have a chance if you want to drop in and listen and hopefully ask questions. And so there'll be lots of ways. Also, I teach classes that go through the entire Health for You resilience training model. Every year I talk about psychological flexibility, I talk about shame resilience, I talk about self-compassion. So getting into that cycle, which I have a sneaky suspicion we'll be using Zoom webinar and trying to make it available to more people this fall, given our experience with these. So, but the main focus point in here, so yes, there will be more resources, so that might help you relax. But I also want you just to relax and trust that if this is ringing your truth meter, if it seems to make sense, if you're liking the changes that you're seeing so far, I would just want you to have a gentle, committed journey here of learning and releasing. And we will never be done. We will never be done. I'm a lifelong learner of this. I will go to my grave or whatever, however that works out when I'm not alive in my body anymore. Not having seen all the things about how thought works or about how my conditioning gets in my way. I'll still have some blinders like that. But I want to have as many of those released as possible. So let's be on the journey together and let's just relax into the journey as it actually makes the work better. This is another comment that was in the survey. I guess I'm wondering what it looks like to release your feeling. Do you mean making it go away or expressing it in some way? I don't know how to release a feeling on command. And then this person went on to say, and I just think it's embedded in here, it's a lot, I'm going to read through it. It says, also when you gave your example that had to do with a car or some machinery that was frustrating, to you. You felt like you wanted to yell about it and get mad, but then you said that you knew that wasn't helpful, and so you made yourself not get mad somehow. What I don't understand is why it is a bad thing to be mad at the car. What is so unhelpful or unhealthy about being mad and showing it if no one is getting hurt, such as being frustrated with a car or a computer? I don't see a problem with this, and I don't see why we need to contain our frustration. Contain our frustration when technology doesn't do what we want it to do. I guess I don't see the point in eradicating all of your frustration from every single instance in your life. And so I would say, I want to say quite a few things about this, because I often feel like if one person takes the time, thank you, by the way, to articulate a question or a thought or a feedback or a pushback, that other people are probably also having that same thought. And so there's quite a few pieces that I want to talk about this. First of all, I would say that I don't want anyone to contain their frustration, because that's emotional suppression, and emotions that you suppress don't just go away. They just stockpile and build up. So I don't want you to be containing your frustration. Like, I'm really mad, but I need to make myself not be mad. And so that's not what I'm talking about. And the releasing in the acknowledge, honor, release, relax, reflect, resolve structure, the releasing isn't really about the actual emotion, because I would have already had time to acknowledge that my computer is a piece of crap, and it's causing problems on our Zoom. Megan knows that. Like, I'm going to acknowledge that, and I can honor the frustration. I'm not saying you can't honor your frustration or your anger or your rage, or your sadness or your disappointment or any of the emotions that are hard. That's why the word honor is there. We want to acknowledge that I have a flat tire and I don't know how to fix it and I'm frustrated. And I can honor that. I could kick the tire. I could yell at the car. One time I was so frustrated in that moment that I was like, and this gas station, it's just a gas station. Where are the service stations? My grandpa worked for Mobile, and they did service. They came out and they could be here to help me. Now no one's here to help me, and blah, blah, and I was actively frustrated. And there's no right or wrong to that. I'm not doing a bad thing. It's just, I was so glad in that moment that I recognized that I was in a frustration. I was shopping in the frustration station. And in that moment, just knowing that good ideas don't come from there. For me, I'm going to ask you guys in a minute to tell me if I'm the only one about that. And in that moment, when I did a physical, I just remember sitting back in my car and just going, okay, because all that's true. They're not going to come help me. I am going to be late. I do have a flat tire. But as I just sat back and came home to myself, and that opened up, that those thoughts went away, because I was like holding the steering wheel and feeling my back on the seat and letting my breathing drop. In the quiet that came after I released, something occurred to me. I remembered that when I was in undergrad and so busy-minded, that AAA came out so many times that I got a letter saying that they weren't coming out anymore. And part of the reason why they came out a lot to help me was I had a busy mind, but I also had a crappy car. But during that time, I learned how to change my own tire. So I'm like, okay, I can remember this. It is what it is. I'm going to be late, but let me just do my best to change this tire and see how this turns out. I get out, I start changing the tire. I start to get frustrated again because I can't get the lug nuts off. Then I had this idea. I calmed down right there. Notice the energy, notice the light, the sun was setting, got quiet again. And then this new thought occurred to me. Might be obvious wisdom to you, like why, but I decided to stand on the lug nut thing carefully, and use my extra weight to my advantage, which made me feel like, look at me being strong. Got the lug nuts off, changed the tire. It was a little greasy, but it didn't even take that long. I wasn't even that late, and on the way I went. What my point about this is that if I had not noticed that I was in a frustration, that I was shopping at the frustration station, I wouldn't have shifted. And if I wouldn't have shifted, who knows, that was like a 10-year ago example. I might still be there frustrated about it. yeah, I have every right to every feeling and every emotional reaction about anything. It's mine. I have a right to it, and you can't take it from me. And I want to start noticing how to navigate that. And somebody's just saying, if you get mad and continue to be mad, you're the one getting hurt. So there is still a cost to somebody, even if it's just you, and up to and including if you punch a wall, you still do hurt yourself. And with things like road rage, like, yeah, I have a right to be mad. I have a right to be mad at that stupid ass bumper sticker that just drove by here. How could somebody even think something like that? And, who am I hurting? Well, I don't know. Depends on if I run a red light because I'm not paying attention. I'm not even in my own body because I'm up having a political debate with somebody I don't even know. Or maybe I could come home and go, yep, some people think that way. Maybe this is what I want to do about that, or something like that. So that's one point I wanted to make about this. And that we actually want the emotion to be dissipating, not contained. And so that's why the acknowledging and honoring. So you can think about a way to honor the frustration of it. I often string together a set of words that only my dad would approve of, right? Because they're gritty. A well-placed cuss word here and there. That's not something that I don't do. It's just I'm mindful of that, and then there's a point where it's no longer helpful. There's a point where it's just going to keep me stuck. And I was telling Megan that I was remembering that last time they redid the psychological manual, they were going to add a new category, which I found fascinating, which was post-traumatic embitterment disorder. And when I was reading about what they were suggesting to say is a problem, is that when somebody has a loss or a change or a betrayal, like infidelity or divorce, and they don't seem to be able to resolve it at some point. At what point? Post-traumatic stress is if it's been longer than 6 months since the last part of the trauma, we would think that in 6 months things might start to resolve for somebody. So it starts to look like post-traumatic if somebody's really still gripped by it down the road. That's because over time, different thoughts come in our thought parade, and we don't have those thoughts, like the frequency, intensity, and duration of those traumatic thoughts should start to dissipate over time. Same with grief. Time doesn't heal alone. Time and space with different thoughts starts to help that healing happen. But post-traumatic embitterment disorder would be someone who, for years and years and years and years, and I've seen this plenty of times in my clinical practice and in my personal life, where somebody's still holding on to an upset that's 7 or 8 years old, and they spend significant time in the frustration station, and they keep putting money into that slot machine thinking it's going to pay out someday, when really the machine has just taken their currency. It's just taken all their capital, their emotional capital. So that's what I'm talking about here. Certainly frustration is a part of life. There's no problem with it. And anger and rage, they're essential. They're essential. They're like, hey, that's not okay. That's experiencing that and expressing that. If you don't express anger if you don't have a way to honor and release it, honor and release, not just release, not just contain, but honor it and then let it go. So that's what I wanted to talk with you about, that you want to acknowledge. So this is how it looked like. I'm going to acknowledge what's frustrating me. And then I'm going to honor the feeling of frustration in the manner that I choose. And then I want to release it. So I want to release my attachment. What you're releasing is the physiological experience of that reality. So that you cannot have something new until we release what we've currently been, creating. I just had 5,000 metaphors in my head. I'm going to choose to go with none of them. So I hope this makes sense. And I do, if you have a question about this right now, I'm just going to give you a minute. Type the question in the Q&A for Megan if you have a question about this right now. If it's still something not landing, or if you can see a question from it that would be helpful to you, I just want to make space for that.
Someone shared in the chat that I think was actually really kind of brilliant, is they, as they're learning how to work through this, as part of that acknowledgement piece, they're naming their feelings. Yeah. And by naming them, it's helping them release. And I really like that.
That's great. that's part of the honoring part for me. Like, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, and you damn well better bet I'm feeling this, right? And I used to go take a medicine ball and do ball slams and swear and picture people's faces. I'm not hurting anyone. Actually, I'm increasing my upper body strength, and I'm physiologically leaving it on the roof. I used to do it on the roof of the Grand River ramp next to the Olin Health Center. Go up there and just slam the ball. Nobody's witnessing, nobody's seeing, no, there's not even a drone saying, oh, that's your emotional resilience consultant, what's up with that? I chose to find a way to go acknowledge, honor, and release it so that I could come back downstairs and be an open-hearted counselor for the next person in my office. So that's great. And somebody else just had a great thing. I can see the chat, it just comes and goes pretty quickly. When you get mad at a frustrated by inanimate objects, it's a signal to me that I've been bottling up other frustrations. That is very true. That the emotional suppression we do all the time sets us up for a jack-in-the-box moment. Or what I used to say when we used to have like Subway club cards or SNH green stamps, if you're as old as I am, where like you do one thing and you get a stamp, and you do one thing and you get a stamp, then you do one thing, you get 3 stamps. And then all of a sudden, some poor person frustrates you just 1 stamp worth, but it's the last stamp in your book and they get the whole book, right? So we do take crowbars to stoves when we can't make them fit. And if we were in a different psychological vantage point, we would probably not cause that damage. So we do want to be just really witnessing whether or not the frustration is helping us find the next way forward, because that's a big part of what we're talking about here. So another way I wanted to try to describe that, wait, the poll questions. So here comes can you do the polls, Megan? I'm really just curious about this.
The first poll is launched and we're getting some responses.
It's the first time I can see the poll, Megan, because I've got your screen. It's kind of fun.
There you go. And there is nothing in the Q&A at this point, so we're okay.
I'm hoping this is a helpful conversation because it's so critical. There's no right or wrong part of it at all in terms of your emotional experience. We just want to be navigating in a way where our value-guided piece comes out more and more.
It looks like we've kind of hit a lull there. So I'll give people a couple more minutes if they want to respond. Not minutes, but seconds. Sorry, my misspoke. And we'll go ahead and close it in 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's a physiological release. You're trying to release what's happening in your body. You're trying to reset. So that's why I put release with relax.
All right, so our responses are, I come up with the best solutions when I'm actively frustrated with something or someone, 2% all of the time, 7% usually, 55% most common at sometimes, and 36% never.
Okay, so if we put the bottom 2 together, it's like 91% of the time. It's not going to be, the place where you can have the very best idea come to you. And that's like when you're, and that's, it's also true whenever you're it's actually not that you're frustrated. So I guess I could adapt this question. Go ahead and put the next poll up so I'll talk while it's finishing. Because it's not just about frustration, it's about really strong attachment to any thought. You could be really attached to a judgment. You could be really attached to like your first thought about how you're going to do something. And if that's not just on a fluke, the best idea, sometimes my first idea is the best idea, but often it's not. So really it's noticing your strong attachment to your experience and releasing the experience, the physiological, psychological experience in the moment, to go from attached or muddy back to clear so you can see if something else, even just wondering if something else is a better idea, will start to pull you away from the attachment of it long enough to see what else comes.
We'll give this another 3 seconds. Okay. So when I act out of a moment of frustration, I regret my actions. 7% all the time, 58% usually, 34% sometimes, and 0 never.
So I guess it's not foolproof. Sorry, I was just reading. That's what happens. I read the chat. I don't mean to. Can you tell me those numbers again, Megan? I got distracted.
Yes, 58% usually, 34% sometimes, and 7% all the time. So we don't have any nevers, and it's, you know, basically everyone sees the challenges with acting out of frustration.
So, you know, when my prediction, like, I wasn't sure how that would turn out. That that on this one, it would be that the idea that frustration is a good idea, or strong attachment to a strong attachment to your first reality, even bigger than that. So we'll go from there. Here's a picture that I stayed up late last night making for y'all as I just was trying to understand where you guys were coming from. So if something happens and the very first thought I have is represented by this red X, maybe it is a hot, angry or frustrated kind of thought. If I lean into that, that thought's gonna become physiologically my experience, and then out of that I'm gonna behave a certain way. That behavior, that outcome, that expression, what I choose to do out of that is going to be very much in that thread. If I had gone with the orange thought, and let's not even get whether it's a memory-based habit thought or a brand new thought. Let's say they're all brand new thoughts. If my first brand new thought through is this orange one, it's going to take me down the orange path. I'm going to have the orange feeling, the orange experience, and then out of that's going to become some orange-directed behavior. What I'm saying is that that orange-directed behavior will be different, most likely, than the red one. And if I take this green one, which is maybe a non-conventional kind of way to think about it, that's going to get me the green feeling, and then out of that some green behavior and a green action. And then, you know, or if I see that and I come back and I actually have a chance to ask myself, what's my deepest, wisest self think I should do about this? That value-guided self might be the blue thing that's just kind of a straight line and like, this is just what I'm going to do. And so because there's variation in thought, there's variation in the outcome. And because we don't see the thought reactivity process, we think that our outcome is created by the situation, when really there's a variety of outcomes for any particular situation that you're going to be dealing with, flat tire or otherwise. And so it's witnessing that, and I don't know if you can see the part on the bottom here. It's my screen's, my control bar is blocking it on my screen, but that the witness perspective is actually seeing yourself hold these thoughts. So like, I was like, I made up this thought. That I do this sometimes where I'm like, well, my first thought was this, and then I noticed I was really tired, and I'm like, maybe that's crap. So I come back, I'm like, well, now what about this thought? Well, then what about this thought? And then, you know, at some point I have a chance to sort of say, okay, I think this is the one I might go with. And sometimes things happen so fast that you just really have to go with your just gut instinct on something. But often, and the more important they are, there's actually time, because this letting go and having a new thought, by the time, how long does it take to have a new idea? If you're looking for it, if you're open to it, if you're not occupied, then it doesn't take that long at all to have a new idea. And then another new idea, and then another, and then another. And if you're in conversations with people, this is what happens in relationships sometimes. Somebody's first thought through is this one. Somebody's first response to that is this one. And then this happens, right? This is like off to the race. This is not a good evening, right? But if somebody has a thought, and then this person has their first thought, and then they say, well, maybe they're tired, or maybe there's something different going on. If both people are able to come here, you're going to come up with a totally different scenario than this. And what I see often happen is somebody get attached and somebody else get attached, and then the attachment just, it ratchets up until there's a fight or a problem, or you've just acted way out of alignment, up to and including breaking a law or causing harm, causing physical harm sometimes, breaking something that matters to you, often because we don't see ourselves in motion. When you release, what are you releasing into? I said this before, I just felt like, it's like, yes, okay, is that frustrated thought that I'm having, that judgmental, is that a better bet than this, than what I might come up with fresh if I take a second to come here first, into all of this capacity, into this health, of this wellness. So somebody else asked this question, which is also a brilliant question. I decided that it warranted time. So first of all, can we just check in? Just do a quick check. Let's do an emotional wellness check-in. What's going on with my physical state? What's my mood like? State of mind pretty clear. Then there's this personal rule book. And so some folks are confused. Is this personal rule book the same thing as they already thought? And our rules are memory-based thoughts. So the answer to that is yes, your personal thoughts would be memory-based thoughts. So they are already thoughts. You've thought about this thing, you've decided this is your rule, and now you're holding on to the rule. It's not fresh, brand new in the moment. Something happens and you go with your rule because you've already thought of your rule. You've already subscribed to that magazine. This is just your way. This is the way I do it. This is the way it needs to be done. This is the way my family did it. This is the way we've always done it. Nostalgia is in here, right? This is because this is the way we've always done it, which actually blocks innovation in many, many situations. So, but I thought this might be helpful because in your thought bucket, which is just your memory, right? In your memory-based thinking, you also have all your other beliefs, things you've come to know, and your education is in there. These are the thought stores that you shop in, that you tend to have a lot of already thoughts that are judgmental in nature, or that are overly optimistic in nature, And then sometimes you use those optimistic thoughts when maybe it's not the best idea to do that. This is also the thought trains that you jump on. So what I'm saying is that in this equation where there's circumstances happening, and then what's going on with these internal factors actually is what determines your experience in the moment. The thought one you can think of in a variety of different ways. Like ultimately it's this. It's that the thought I'm currently having is going to create my outcome in this moment. It's going to create what I bring to it. It doesn't necessarily do anything about the outcome because that's sometimes outside of our control, but it's going to be what I bring to it. And so what I'm wanting you to see is that the quality of your thought in this moment, the thought you're currently having, is seriously and dramatically impacted by what's going on with the other three. Because if you're low blood sugar, in a crappy mood, and your state of mind is busy, you're going to have a different thought, most likely, than if you're rested and steady and open. So getting curious about any of those just gives you the data. What it does do, if we go back a couple of those, is if you start to notice that you have a strong attachment to a rule, it gives you the opportunity to start wondering if that's actually a rule. And where did you get that rule? Does everybody have that rule? What would it be like for me to handle this problem if I suspended that rule? If I suspended that rule, would anything dramatic happen? Where did I even make it up in the first place? Have I fact-checked that? There's a woman named Byron Katie, Dr. Katie. I always want to say her name is Katie Byron, but her name is Byron Katie, and she wrote a book called Loving What Is, which is very much about acceptance and shifting through your experience. But she says about your thought, like you have a strong thought, right? She actually has people write down as a way to acknowledge and honor what you're upset about and what you believe to be true about it. And then she'll say about a piece of it, she'll say, is that thought true? And then there's 4 questions. Is that thought true? And then she'll say, can you be 100% absolutely sure that's true? And that's the tricky question, because it's very rare that I can sort of say with the second one that it's 100% that it's true. Including like on my first birthday after my mom and dad died, I was sitting in the living room and I was feeling all kinds of feelings. And I had this thought that I'm alone because my folks were both gone. And I was just feeling, because we're 100% of the time we're feeling our thinking. I was just feeling that thought. I was just so painfully feeling that thought. And then I was just reading this book at the time. And so I was like a little snarky. And I was like, okay, is that true? What? I'm like, well, they sure as hell ain't here at my birthday party. And then the next question, can you be 100% sure that that's true? And in that moment, all of a sudden I realized it challenged all my questions about afterlife and energy. And can I be 100% sure that they weren't with me right now? And then my brain just kind of blew up. But then even then, I'm like, well, you know what? That's not what I said. I didn't say my mom and dad aren't with me. That's not what went through my head. What went through my head is I'm all alone. And when I asked myself if that thought was true, it was like, because, I was Mama Lisa to 3 kids that were just about to have a Mama Lisa parade. And my partner at the time and her parents showed up for me beautifully. And her parents drove down from the UP because they didn't want me to not have parents on this day. And so they drove down so we could go to Olive Garden. It wasn't a big deal, but they drove a long way to show up. And I think about all my friends and all the people that care about me and my siblings. It's like, no, I'm not alone. And when that thought shifted, everything else about that experience shifted too. So that's just a thought I had. But sometimes when it's a rule, and I've decided this is the way it has to be because somebody said so, or because I said so, but my old self said so, this self might not even have anything to say or do about it. So I hope that's helpful too. What you want to know is that whatever thought you go with that's the thought cycle, is that thought's going to get connected with your consciousness. It's going to create your experience physiologically and emotionally. And then out of that, you're going to have some kind of behavior, and behavior has outcome. So that's the thought cycle, that the thought leads into that emotional experience and physiological experience. And then you're going to behave out of it and you're going to have an outcome. And sometimes those outcomes reinforce the belief bucket. So you kind of get into a bucket loop. So I just wanted you to see that. Okay. The metaphors you guys seem to think were helpful. I just want to, I was going to ask you guys to chat some more about this, but I think for time today, I'm going to go a different way. But just bringing them back to your mind, that these are practical skill building, right? Like you want to be noticing the fluid nature. I guess I'm going to go back on what I just said because I am curious. When you noticed that you were brewing something, in the moment that you noticed it, what happened? Can anybody that had that experience, can you share what happened with that? Like you're noticing that this thought being brought to consciousness into this kind of tea, serenity, irritability, over responsibility, scarcity. I end up laughing at myself in a good way. Like I chuckle. I go, well, there's a thought that'll take you places. That's what thought trains. I'm like, I see it. Wow, could I embark on that? And I could see where that would go. I liked myself better when I gave into the thought. I felt free from having to act in accordance to the brewing. So you don't have to follow what you just made up. Oh, I love that. You don't have to follow what you just made up. I wasn't able to stop it entirely, but I was able to choose not to spread it to my household. Yes, because when we have the flu, heaven forbid a virus, we try to keep it away from people. But when we have the mental flu, we like sneeze and vomit all over people. We want to share it everywhere. So I love that this person said, maybe not. Right? Maybe I'll let myself make sure I'm grounded before I actually do some more sharing with people. The thoughts that are brewing interrupt a previous peaceful state. And then I notice, and the brewing is interrupted. I chose not to engage in more of that brewing. So I love this because you noticed peace, and then you noticed leaving peace, and then you chose peace in that moment. I know I reminded myself that I already took the train and found something else to distract myself. I already took the train. So it's sort of like a disembarking the train strategy. That's great. I took a literal pause to settle and ground myself before proceeding in anger. It's okay to throw out a pot of tea if it doesn't taste good. Wow, that's really true. Like, it doesn't matter how long you've been making it up. Like, Stephen King said that about a book he was writing. He had written a lot of the book, and then he realized the book was crap. And so he's like, what do I just keep writing this book? Or I just say, I release this book. Let me just crumple it up and throw it away and start fresh. So what? You've been making that up. Now what? What's a better flavor? What's a flavor that's more lined up with my values? I love that you threw out a pot of tea, that you didn't. It's just like, let it go. Oh, now, of course, the movie Frozen just came to mind because I said let it go, because that's in my already thought bucket. One thing I found helpful was the idea that we are not responsible for the first thought we have, but we are responsible for the second thought, or ultimately what you choose to do about that. Unsure of the source of that, though. Not sure what that question, I'm not sure what that last part meant. When a thought happens or hurt feelings arise, I fight it in my mind because I want peace. Okay, so that's that's you having a thought that's creating a feeling, and you thinking you have to get rid of the thought in order to get rid of the feeling. This is the exact place where I would want you not to do that, because that's you trying to effort. So if you're trying to get rid of anxiety because you're having an anxious thought and you're brewing it, you can't get rid of that flavor of tea by struggling with your anxiety and by trying to tell yourself you shouldn't feel anxious. There's a whole lot we should, it's perfectly normal to feel anxious about a lot of this stuff going on, but it's not helpful always. And so instead of trying to struggle with the tea and the thought, that's when you want to bring your attention to something else in the present moment and really commit yourself to bringing your full beaming attention to the muscles in the back of your neck as you stretch, letting your breath drop back out. If you shift your attention with a diffusion strategy, which we're going to talk a little bit about next week, and then hopefully have you do some more study about with another set of videos you can watch. What you're just trying to do is just create some space between you and the thought that's brewing that tea. If you loosen your allegiance to the thought, not making it go away, but just loosening your grip on it, not by trying to fight it, but by bringing your attention somewhere else, you'll start to notice that it starts to shift. And so I just want you to try that on. It's a different vantage point. Instead of trying to struggle with the thought, which I did for years and years and years and just turned my anxiety into panic, instead trusting that even when I'm really turned up about that thought down below coming home, it's like, oh, I'm shopping in the anxiety shop. I think I'll try to help myself go back home for dinner. It might not be instant. I think Jill Bolte Taylor, scientist, amazing scientist, wrote a book called The Stroke of Insight. And she says the physiological life of that thought is about 90 seconds from the time that you disengage from it. So the person that was on the thought train, when you distract, if you actually bring your full attention somewhere else, 90 seconds later, up to 90 seconds, sometimes shorter, your body's going to reset itself. Which is why it's important when trauma happens to acknowledge and honor it and then release it, because sometimes then it just actually dissipates and doesn't actually just settle back into our heart and soul and our cells. When I notice the tea brewing, I can choose not to let it get too strong by interrupting it. So we're just navigating it. We're not controlling it. We're trying to find an ebb and a flow with it. So, okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that, because I just felt like I wanted to hear your voices. The thought stores, you guys came up with so many good thought stores that as I was reading that and reading the chat and reading that, this is what your thought stores look like. And you'll have access to this. This PowerPoint is in the Google folder, so you can go, even print the slide out and put it somewhere. Like, where are the stores you tend to shop in? And so many thought habits. These are just conditioned thought habits. And none of them are wrong. And a lot of them, like when a person sort of shows me their mental mall, the map of their mental mall, if we were standing in their mental mall looking at that information board, which is in what's in what ring, and you are here. It totally makes sense why people have the thought stores that they have. They have the historical or cultural trauma that they have based on racism or sexism, the way that their upbringing, their trauma experience, their relationship history, their temperament type. Like I can always understand why somebody has the stores that they have. The freedom comes in not having to shop in all the stores that are in the mall. And when we get pulled into one, like some thought happens and we get hijacked and all of a sudden we're in that mall. Trauma is very much like that we have some navigational skills to help us know where we're at and help us back out of the store. And how do we come back? Oh, that just happened. How do we come back home? All of the skills that strengthen your ability to know yourself calm help you start to notice when you leave. That's what was so exciting with some of that chat a minute ago, is that people are starting to notice themselves leaving calm or clarity or steadiness or whatever word you might want to use. And I love the wine store. I don't know, I thought that was great. And WHINE, wine. So this is a store where once you go through the front of that store, which is just the wining, which is what you might notice, that's how you might notice you're in the wine store. There's probably other stores that's connected to that you haven't noticed. And then what we notice and what we joke about, what we get known as is the wine, but there might be some other store. And sometimes we need some help working through some issues to sort of disconnect us from some of these stores. And there's different kinds of therapies that do different, great work in different pathways. If you're really struggling with some of these stores, you want to check with one of us to see if we can figure out what's the best healing path so that you can maybe not be so impacted by that store and not spend so much time in it. I'm always grateful when I catch on to a new conditioned thought habit. When I say grateful, I don't mean like, yay, it's more like, ugh. But I'm grateful because if I don't see it, then I don't interrupt it. If I don't see it, then I'm still going to continue to get there and act out in a habitual way, which is typically not lined up with my values, which is what the answer goes back. Is the behavior I'm about to demonstrate lined up with who I want to be or not? I want to be value guided. I want to live a value guided life. I want to like who I am because I've decided this is kind of who I want to be, and I'm moving in that direction, which is also where this session's webinar is heading. When I think about thought trains, did I just jump on a powerful thought? Am I being transported? Thought trains really, that metaphor really feels like just getting jerked by a thought. So these are some that are like defensive, reactive, shame, jump on the shame train, and trauma. These are powerful locomotives that, so funny because what song just came through my head when I said locomotive. That's how I already thought that works. Some of you know what song I'm talking about, and some of you don't know what the heck I'm talking about because we probably have different thoughts in our already thought memory-based bucket. Here's a question asked by the Friday cohort, but it's very well timed. I'm sure somebody's asking, who am I when I'm not in my bucket? And I often joke that I could wear this name tag places. Really, people would just really freak out about what to do with me. But when I really get really down to it, who I am right now, at core, is I'm universal energy in a human form creating a day. Right? I'm creating a webinar. I'm creating a weekend. Soon, right after this webinar, I'm going to create a weekend with my wife. We are creating our campus culture. I contribute that in a way that I want to. And so I'm a universal energy in a human form creating. All the metaphors we've just spent time talking about really show how thought works in a particular moment where something happens and this is the thought I attach to and this is the TM brewing. There's another way we need to talk about thought, which for me, this was just life-changing because I used to not think of myself as a universal energy in a human form creating, which is fresh and new right now. I'm always this. So the next thing that happens can be new and fresh because I'm universal energy in a human form creating. If you would have asked me who I was, 15 years ago, I would have said, I'm the youngest of three. I'm an adult child. I'm an alcoholic. I have some family trauma. I'm a social worker. There would have been like definitive things. I would have, this is who I am, like this already formed version versus this impersonal, informal energy that can become, I would have been already created. So all of the shame-based messages I got were kind of like crafted together into like a quilt that I wore on top of me. My story, my self-concept was very, I had a low self-esteem, low self-concept. It was very heavy. I carried a painful story about who I was, and because I thought it was actually who I was, there was never freedom from it. When, just having a thought, when somebody started to help me see that I am not that story, I am not broken, I never was, that I wasn't born with that story, and that story is something I created over time with the help of a lot of sources, some of which were contaminated, and it became this thing that I was currently believing to be true. And if I currently believed it to be true and I continued to believe it to be true, I could only be that, which wasn't good. And even though other people could see that I was doing great stuff, my story raised questions about that. I saw somebody raise their hand. If you have a question, type it to Megan so she can interrupt me. This is who I think of myself when we're born, and this is us. This is a universal energy in a human form, shining bright. My daughter wants to sing in this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Like, yeah, that's a way to think about that. Like, we have this energy and we're just shining it out bright. This person is not encumbered yet with a story. But moment to moment when things happen, and then the story we take about that is we craft something. This is how it works. Something gets my attention. I look, I experience it, and then I decide what it means, and then I file that away, and then the learning portal closes, and now I have a story. So when my dad, in a drunken moment, slid the low-fat sour cream across the table and kind of yelled at my mom, this is low fat. If it's low fat, it tastes like crap and I don't want it. And it got my attention. And I'm like, because I've already been told I look like him, I eat like him. So I took a note, like, if it's low fat, and I lick my pencil. If it's low fat, now it'd be like this. If it's low fat, it tastes like crap and I don't want it. Except I wrote down, if it's healthy, it tastes like crap and I don't want it. Nobody saw me file that away. But for years, related to my daily food choice, when something showed up that was considered by some to be healthy, I would say, no, thank you. I'm not interested, because the story preceded it. Well, then it started to turn into a story about not being able to trust myself with food, which then led to all other kinds of stories about body image. And this is kind of what starts to happen. We start to carry a story about ourselves. Like we start to experience things, people tell us things, we start to hold on to these things as like the truth. And if it ends up heavy or shame-based or negative in any way, well, even if it doesn't, it's still like just our version of what we've been told is true. We just start getting more and more gunky, for lack of a clinical word. And then we start trying to contain it, and then we start trying to hide it because we don't want anyone else to know that we aren't feeling good about ourselves. And so then we start spray painting the outer box all shiny gold with perfectionism, and inside it just keeps getting more and more. And if you asked me at this point who I was, I would have described the gunk, if you were somebody that I was actually going to let in to help me. But I ask you, like, is this person's innate health any smaller than it was in the first place? Are they still connected to that flow of energy? Can you still see it? It's like not maybe what this person would, if this person looked in the mirror, they would see the gunk first. They would maybe even forget that they had any health, and that health is back behind it. By the way, that health is still trying to live and trying to bring you creativity and wisdom and insight. It just has to go through all of the contaminated messages that you are now holding to be truth on top of it. When I was in that place, I messed that up. Yeah. When I was in that place, I was very heavy. Like I didn't even know I had health. but somebody started to help me. This is how this links together. So I was carrying a story over time. My already thought bucket was pretty dense and populated with unhelpful stuff. Like that square right there with all that gunk in it, you can think of that on that other picture as like what was in my bucket. But as somebody helped me moment to moment start to see that I don't have to go with that, I started to have little moments where I didn't do what I always did. I didn't think what I always thought. And I started, like, instead of that story being like right here, it started to back up a little bit. And as I started to get space between me and my story, it stopped being so like concrete and formed, and it started to actually just be what it is, which is thought. Like your story about yourself, all the things you believe to be true are actually just thought. Like that, the only place it actually exists, including the story we write about traumatic things that happen. There's what happened to me, and there's the story I wrote. We are much more impacted by the story we're holding about it. Ask anyone that works with survivors, and they'll tell you that that's true. There's what happened, and then there's the conclusions I drew about what happened. And those are quite the burden, and often not true because we've made them up from inside of 5-year-old thinking or 10-year-old thinking or 45-year-old thinking, and culturally influenced thinking. What I love about this is as you start to wake up, this is what happens. And so it's back to that question, like, how am I learning it enough? Well, if we're just moving in this direction, then you're doing just fine. And you want to learn more, because every time you learn more, you get a little freer. I was just saying that I ran into a webinar from one of my trainers. His name's Joe Bailey. And every time he came back to town to do another training, I would pick him up at the airport. And one day when I picked him up, he goes, Lisa, every time I come back here, there's like another layer of you gone. And I can just see your health. I was probably still here because I was still kind of busy-minded. Like, ooh, I'm picking up Joe Bailey and he knows more than me. And now I'm like, hey, Joe, good to see you. And now I'm like, what? I don't know enough to do these webinars. And here I'm like, let me see what I can offer. I hope that's a helpful thing to be thinking about. We're doing pretty good, Megan, on the time. What happened? Did time stop today? And how did that work? Okay, so moving away from thought for a minute.
Hold on, before you do that, I want to interrupt you for 1 second. And there's a question that came in. Is it not likely that some thought stories are fiction and others are nonfiction or real? So asking the question about, are some of the thought stories we have fiction or are they all real?
So it's a really complicated question. First of all, I would say, I just want you to wonder about them. And if there's a story that you want to keep about yourself, then keep it. I just don't want us to be keeping stuff without like checking it out, right? And so what's tricky about that question is, let's say it's true that I cheated on somebody. Is that part of my story? That's like always going to be part of my story. Like that's something that I did once. I made a bad choice and I did that. I'm not saying, by the way, I did that. I'm just using this as an example. My son did that, actually. It's a story that he's given me permission to see. What I'm really glad is that that's true, but the other part of the story he made up when that was true was that he was a horrible excuse for a human being and he didn't deserve to be in any healthy relationship ever again, and he should just never date. Okay, so is the story true or not? Well, a piece of it is. And if we get to the part where like we did this thing that we're not happy with, then our value guided self gets to say, and then what did I learn from that? And who do I want to be today? And so the idea that because something happened back there, it means I have to be this way. An example would be a guy who I once met him at a conference, and he had only had a couple of haircuts as an adult outside of the prison system. And he had a story that he was a drug-using person who just kept messing up, and that he was a worthless, no-good piece of, which somebody told him and he wrote down and believed, and that he was never going to really be able to be successful outside of jail. And then he was learning these things, and he was actually in California, so it was like 3 strikes and you're out. And he was between strike 2 and 3. So he was going to get out, and he went to this training and he was learning this thing, and this person that is training with him showed him this blue dot guy. It's what she calls him. Her name's Beverly Wilson. She's terrific, and she's a person who had a very dense, difficult story from a very abusive background, plus an African-American woman with a whole lot of racism and a whole lot of historical and cultural trauma and a whole lot of messages about what that meant about her. And she was stuck inside of all that. And as she learned this, she started to be able to get some space from that and could find her way in such a more helpful way. Still dealing with some of those, and will always be dealing with some of those systemic sources of pain and oppression. This guy, learning from Beverly, he got out one day and he was actually thinking about going to see his aunt, because last time he was out, he didn't get to see that aunt and he kind of liked her. So he wanted to go see her first because he didn't know how long he'd be out and he didn't want to miss the opportunity. And as he was walking around there, he had a brand new thought that was, you know what? Like, if I don't do something wrong, I don't have to go back. And now you're like, duh, like, sure. But for him, it was a brand new thought. And so the thought that he had, the story that he had, that he was never going to be able to be different than that, that part wasn't true. The fact that he has a criminal record, that's still true. But what it means about him and what it means about his life, he has more freedom about. Like, he's universal energy in a human form creating post that experience. So it's a tricky question. And I hope I've done it just a little bit of justice. But I'm not trying to reach in and take anybody's story. I'm wanting you to, like, moment to moment, see, just check it out. Like, is it true that I can't do public speaking, or do I have to help myself experience anxiety when I lean into that because I kind of want to share some things? Turns out it wasn't true. Turns out so much of the story I thought was fact was really not. And it's not my story anymore. Again, don't believe a word I think. You want you to be wondering about it for yourself. But if you don't even know that you have created a story, you don't even know to kind of wonder about it, then if you're attached without witnessing to a story, then you have to be that story. There's no freedom from that in that regard. I hope that helped, Megan. As we move here towards what I would want you to be thinking about for next week, we go back to the 6-word framework and just lean in for a minute and talk about reflect. Because sometimes people don't know what to do with that. Reflecting is really just asking yourself any question that invites your deeper, wiser self to communicate with you. I haven't really ever said it that clearly before. That I'm going to ask, I call it my wisdom part. I want to ask my deepest, wisest self, the part of me that cares about my deepest wisdom and my greatest sense of purpose. Like, what do I really want to create here? What's the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? If my value is self-compassion and self-love, it's going to be, how can I help myself get through this disappointing upset? Some of the reflect questions I would want you to be wondering about is asking yourself, what's the next best thing I can do in this situation? I think it might have been the Friday webinar, people that like what they got was that even if the after the fact thing, maybe it was this one, I can't remember. Even if it was the after the fact, I saw that I didn't just respond, I can come to this place where I could say, what's the next best thing to do? And I can just do that. Who do I want to be and how do I want to move forward? Is the reflective question. It's the creative response part. It's like, okay, that happened and this frustration, my tires, like what do I know? What do I know that I can help myself with? Or how can I open up and have a new idea? We don't respect the new ideas enough. We trust the ideas we already have, but we don't open up. We do with Google. We go ask Google a question and see what it tells us, but we don't ask our wisdom and our value guided self enough what it thinks we should do, because we're too busy reacting habitually in ways that aren't kind of who we want to be. So these are just some examples of reflective questions. Brené Brown, initially in her book Daring Greatly, started to frame this reflective question set of questions that I find very helpful. It's Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up, be seen, and live brave in a particular area of my life? So she would say, pick an area of your life. This is your homework, a little bit of your homework. Pick an area of your life, like partnering during stay at home. And then say, how do I want to show up and be seen and live brave in my partnership with my isolation partner? And then you want to sort of say, what 2 or 3 values can I think about? What are some words I can think about that are really ideas that might be directional for me? Goals are things you can just say, I'm going to do this, put it on your to-do list with a little box and check them off. Those are goals. You can complete them and they're done. Values are kind of your guiding principles, the directional quality that you want to say. When I came out of a relationship and I was in a great deal of debt, I valued frugalness, but I also valued doing what was in the best interest of my kids. So I made choices that were not frugal. Like one of my kids went to a boarding school because for a variety of reasons, it was the right thing to do. But my lifetime during that time, even given that choice, was to be frugal in a lot of other areas, so it kind of balanced out. It wasn't the greatest example. Think of an area of your life, like how do I want to show up as the emotional wellness consultant for Michigan State during the pandemic? What are some values that are going to guide connection? Is one for me that I might say is being part of connecting people is important. So we want you to start to wonder about an area, and it helps to just try on just one area, an area of your life. And the questions I might ask, I'm going to give you a couple more questions. So if you've got something to write something down with, go ahead and do this. It's how do I want to show up and be seen and live brave in this arena? So you might want to say, what's the arena? And then how do you want to show up and be seen and live brave? And then what permissions do you need to give yourself so that you can start to show up in that way? What permission? What are some permissions? Permissions to be clunky at first. Permission to try an FFT a freaking first time. Wow, really $1.99 on Kindle? Daring greatly. That's awesome. What was I saying? Permission to permission. If the arena is my health, and I want to show up by having more sleep. One of the permissions I might need to give myself is to let things be unfinished, or to say no. I give myself permission to say no the next time somebody asks me to do 17 things. So permissions are really important. Giving yourself permission slip because it's actually because you're noticing in there, to link this to the other learning, you're giving yourself permission to kind of break a rule you've been holding. I give myself permission for my house not to look perfectly clean if I'm going to do these other things. So permissions are important as a way to give yourself a little space to do it different. And then the next question is, what 2 or 3 values? So there's going to be, I can't remember if I already put this in a Thursday folder. There's going to be a handout that's called the Lantern Exercise. It's from Brene Brown's Daring Way curriculum, which is connected to the book Daring Greatly. If you haven't read Daring Greatly, that's a really good book. If you want to focus your learning on more leadership and work-related things, then you could start with Dare to Lead, which is her most current book. But this exercise, it starts out with a lot of words. You think about the arena, you think about kind of how you want to show up, and then with that in mind, you look at the word list and just circle or check or somehow indicate all the words on there that seem to pertain, and then let the rest of them go. And then with the words that you have chosen, are there themes? Do these 3 maybe look like this? And, are there some themes to it? Ultimately, you're trying to get down to just 2 or 3 words that arena of your life, you can say, this is what's going to guide me. Now, why is that important? Well, here's why. Because if you want to show up and be seen and live brave in your life, and you go on about to dare greatly, Brene says, if you dare greatly, often enough or long enough, you're going to get your butt beat. And you're going to have a disappointment, and you're going to have a letdown, and you're going to have a failure. And your values are how you get back up. And it's how you move on from there. It's how you keep going. I definitely think that each of us needs to kind of be thinking about the kind of people we want to be in community, because coming out of this pandemic time, we're going to want to show up the way we want to be. So we just kind of do that exercise. Next week, I'm going to ask you to maybe share in chat what arena, if you want to share, like how you want to show up, and then kind of what your 2 or 3 values are. Because it is what helps you when you go through the 6-word process. It's what helps you orient. It's like putting the address in your GPS. Your GPS knows where you want to go. When you're clear about the kind of mom you want to be, or the kind of partner you want to be, or the kind of neighbor you want to be, how you want to navigate your finances, when a choice comes up that challenges that, you can go, okay, what were my values? Oh, yeah. Okay, here I go. This is what they are. And then your behavior, you resolve to take behavior that's got those values behind it. So that's the directional quality. So I would share that this year, I'd say last year, and for the last 5 years prior, my values related to my role as a part of the MSU EAP and Health for You team, and my work in those roles was caring, contribution, and connection. That every day when I walk by this beautiful structure called Beaumont Tower, which I kind of think of as that part at the top being like an antenna that can radiate good energy to you all. And every day on the way in, I do a 3-breath reset. And on that 3rd breath in, I will just send out good energy to some of the people that I have on my heart and mind that work for our institution, the incredible workforce that we all are. As I'm going into the building, as I'm starting my day, I want to ask myself, this is what I want to bring. Let me center on this, and let my ego go, and let me just make sure I'm being about these values when I walk in, because I don't want to be reactive to what happened yesterday or what's going on. I want to address what's going on, but I want to do that from my value guided center. So this year, in 2020, and little did I know how important it would be, but this year I chose some new values. I wanted to practice calm, and really kind of stay close to my calm self. And calm is not like disengaged. Calm and clarity, calm, open self. I wanted to really embrace curiosity, because I can see that when I get defensive, sometimes I still get defensive more than I'd like to. And I think that curiosity is the antidote to defensiveness, because when someone gives me feedback, I don't have to defend against it. I can just be curious. I can be curious about what they're thinking and why they see it that way. I can also be curious about what I think about it. And sometimes when I'm not defensive about it and I get curious about it, I'm like, oh, that's really pretty wise. This makes me think about this. And then I'm just more open to feedback now, and I wanted to do that. So calm and curiosity and courage, which is, there are times when my values tell me I should say or do something, and there's still too many times where I'm like afraid I'm going to get fired or something, and I hold back. So that's my value guided self that's guided me through the pandemic related to work. So the arena of my life, my role at MSU, I give myself some permissions to try on new things, and then these are my values. I'm going to ask Megan to share hers, because she's also done some of this work, and I just would like her to share it if she's still willing.
Of course. So my arena, it kind of crosses over, but they really apply to my home life and the farm that we work on. And I've also tried to bring a bit of this to my other part of my life and at work. And those words and they don't have to be all the same letter. We just told them to be this way this time. My words that I've been kind of working on this year are grace, grit, and gratitude. So you have to have some grace to step back and kind of look at things, or hear from other people and hear tough feedback. But you gotta be a little bit of grit. You gotta have that oomph in there to, help yourself really, come back and make sure that it's, what you should be doing, not just those, first thoughts through. And then, really showing gratitude and being appreciative of all the things that I've been able to do and I'm still doing. And so that's just been really important for me this year. And I reevaluate these, sometimes more often than yearly. And sometimes they change throughout. But having those values that I go back to and think about, they're actually on a sticky note on my wall, because that's how I roll. So they're just something to help me really, remind myself of how do I want to come at a project? How do I want to respect and honor and be a part of a group that I'm a part of? What is my role and how do I want to show up that way? So hopefully that helps. Lisa, you're muted.
But I was saying all kinds of awesome stuff. What was I saying? What I love about it is it's very individual, right? Like Megan needs to get clear about her areas of life and decide what she wants to bring and be bringing it. I need to do that too. That is in addition to, and hopefully in connection with and related to, our institutions need to get clear about the kind of institution we want to be and what those values are. So values happen at multiple levels. There's my personal and interpersonal, and then there's the institutional and cultural values as well. But this is the part that is yours for you. It is your directional quality, how you want to show up. We have much more likelihood to get from where we are to where we want to be if we have some values to help us move in that direction.
And Cheryl just asked that exact question. Do you have to have separate values for work and personal? Are they different? And I think that you said it best. It's, you want to think about those arenas and you may have words that cross over. One of the words that I really bring that's more on my work side is calm. I'm pretty calm at home, pretty chill about things, kind of deal with my personal life of a roller coaster with a husband who likes to jump off cliffs, as I say. And I stay pretty calm in that. But a lot of times there's things at work that can get me excited. And so that's probably one of those values that I would probably cross out and say, grace, calm, and gratitude at work. So just to, really still be thinking about what are those words. And it does matter in a situation. Sometimes if I'm going into a big situation or a big issue or I need to frame something, sometimes I will think about what are my values or what is most important to me, very lined up about this situation. And it allows me to go in a way that I would not have gone otherwise, really taking that chance to step back and say, what are my values for this? So hopefully that helps from that perspective. And I'm sure Lisa can share more.
Yeah, well, and I saw the chat question about, do we have to have a fancy alliteration in our values? And the answer to that is no. Although then I was laughing because Brene Brown's two values across that are back behind everything she does in her big professional career and also her personal life are faith and family, which I realize are both F's. But no, you can pick whatever words you want, just 2 or 3 to just kind of, because you want them to be a touch point for you. When you get knocked sideways, what's going to help you have your bearings. In my parenting as a single mom, the idea that I want to do what's in the best interest of my kids. In the best interest was a mantra that helped me have a directional quality. It wasn't even just a word, it was a concept. I want to do what's in the best interest. If I know what's in the best interest of my kids, I will do that. Now at this empty nest stage, and probably should have done a little earlier, I probably want to have some bigger questions about if it's always in the best interest of my kids but exhausts me, then maybe we need to do some reconfiguring. Just like you should always be checking in and resetting your boundaries in relationships, we should always be checking in and recalibrating, putting in new coordinates. And maybe that was that, it's like the book, like What Got You Here Won't Get You There. There's the piece of that I appreciate is that it's not about this, like, I'm here right now and this is where I'd like to go. This is what I'd like to bring. How do you want to show up and be seen and live brave as a Michigan State employee post-Nassar, post-COVID-19? What do you want to contribute in your unit or department? How do you want to show up and be seen? What do you want to be known for? And we can ask those questions in a lot of different settings. Oh, I didn't realize that we got past there again. Just a second or two. We were going to do Q&A. Oh, I was going to set this up. There's still 148 people here. Let me just say this, because there's a handout in the Google folder that's called the ACT Psychological Flexibility Model. Oh, Megan, did I actually had them actually fill this out last time. We'll just have to start here next time, I guess. We'll have to figure that out.
We can start here.
Next time? Okay, we'll start here next time. That's what we'll do. That's not too bad. I got close.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If anybody has a Q&A. If anybody has a question, type it in the Q&A before you leave, and I'll try to respond to that in writing in the next day or two. It's been a pleasure to be with you all. I hope this is helping just gently reframe how you move through life. By the way, those values and my clarity about that, being value guided does not make life easy. It just helps me find my way, right? And somebody said something about the Friday webinar, like, this isn't easy. And I don't think I ever said it was going to be easy. Wisdom isn't always easy, but it's always wise. And I get to like who I am if I'm living life lined up with my deepest, wisest self. That's what I want for you, because there's hard's happening, right? And so how do we want to move through it? Who do we want to be? And how can we like who we are? And we'll leave it there. Take good care, everybody.